Here is 8 years of studying pain science boiled down into a simple equation. Pain equals body damage times nervous system threat. So if either of these go up, pain will go up. And if either body damage or nervous system threat go down, pain will go down. So oftentimes, both clinicians and patients alike neglect one side of this equation. And oftentimes, it seems to be that the nervous system side of the equation is neglected. Most people are aware that body damage can cause pain, but very few are aware that the nervous system can actually influence the outcome of a particular body damage. Let me give you an example of the extreme side of the equation so that you can understand where I'm coming from. So, sponges are multicellular organisms and they're animals, but they don't have a sensory nervous system. So, they could get a lot of body damage but not experience any pain because this side of the equation is zero. You must have a brain to feel pain. So, generally speaking, when it comes to healthcare, we've been really, really good at this side of the equation. Surgery, advancements, medication, lots of different things that have helped us improve the body structures and what is going on inside the body. But very few actually acknowledge, to be honest, and if not, at least neglect the nervous system side of this equation. Nervous system threat matters. So let's talk about some of the things that can influence the nervous system side of the equation and the body damage side of the equation. So things that influence the body damage side of the equation are quite obvious. They're structures, usually joints and the things that make up joints, or nerves. And physical damage can happen to either of these structures and often produce pain. We've all experienced this to some degree, where we hurt or injure ourselves and we get body damage and we subsequently get pain. So the body damage side of the equation usually comes down to damage to joints and the structures within that joint and damage to nerves. These are the two types of damage that we see when the body damage side of this equation. And surgeons often will intervene on this side. And there's some really, really good examples to explain why body damage is a main driver of certain pain. For instance, a total hip replacement gets amazing outcomes when surgery is done to influence this side of the equation. And pain then reduces or disappears completely. But there's other examples where surgery doesn't work and it's not effective. And they address the body damage side of the equation and pain still remains. When it comes to physiotherapy, physiotherapy often, at least historically, has also been involved mainly on the body damage side of the equation, strengthening joints, strengthening particular damaged structures, honoring the healing times, introducing load at the right time to build and strengthen these structures so that the body damage side of this pain equation goes down or disappears and pain reduces as a result. But oftentimes, in both physiotherapy and also surgery, we get a change in the body damage and yet pain doesn't disappear. And it has surgeons scratching their heads going, what exactly is going on here? Why, since I've done such a good job, and oftentimes they really are, they're very skilled at their job, they've done the perfect job, and what would help and fix many people hasn't fixed this individual in front of them. And the reason being is because the nervous system side of the equation, the nervous system threat, is actually the primary driver of this person's pain symptoms. And so surgery falls short of fixing the problem of pain. Another example of this is oftentimes we see scans in the research where people have disc bulges and have absolutely no pain. So there's studies being done that they just scan a whole bunch of people without back pain, and they look at what they find. And they see that even in my age group, about 40% of people will have damaged structures. Like in this case, 40% of people have a disc bulge and absolutely have no pain whatsoever. And this doesn't make sense from a body damage only perspective when it comes to pain. But it does make sense when we understand that pain is more than body damage. It's not less, it's part of the equation, but it's more than body damage. Pain is body damage times the nervous system's threat. So let's talk about the nervous system threat. The nervous system can be threatened by a whole bunch of things, and one of them is physical damage, physical stresses. But all sorts of stresses in our life can influence the nervous system side of the equation. These can include lifestyle factors like poor sleep, poor exercise habits, which can calm and regulate our nervous system, psychological distress. And this is where pain science education can really help to understand that pain is more than just body damage. Things like social connection. So a feeling that you're in a tribe and that there's people that love and care for you will reduce the nervous system threat side of the equation. There's lots of different things that can influence this. What we know is that people with, say, adverse childhood events or childhood traumas often develop a pain that is usually sort of driven by the nervous system side of the equation. And that's because as a child, they had this trauma that went on, and their nervous system has learned that it needs to protect them. And it has been, in some ways, dysregulated. Now, that is no blame on them. Let's not blame the victim here. But the nervous system is a part of that pain problem that they now develop in later life. We know this by the research that adverse childhood events will actually increase your likelihood to develop persistent pain. So we need to address either body damage or nervous system threat to reduce pain. Now, the question that you should be asking, and the question that a clinician working with you should be asking, is which of these factors is the most modifiable? Now, I see people with extreme body damage, spines that have had multiple surgeries, that have really structural problems. And this side of the equation might be a 10 for that person. But the problem is they've spent a lot of time trying to influence this side, and resources and money trying to influence this side of the equation. And there really is nothing that can be done. Oftentimes, specialists have said to them, "We can't operate again. There's nothing we can do to help you. We're really sorry. We need to implement pain medication, but there really is nothing that we can do." But that doesn't mean that we can't address the nervous system side of the equation, which will ultimately influence the amount of pain that they have. So sometimes there may be life stresses or threats that are going on for the nervous system that can increase the pain outcome. So for instance, they may be going through a recent divorce, there's some family breakdown and issues, there's stress financially, they're not able to work anymore. And so this side of the equation gets really worked up. And so they have, if we do the equation, 10 times 50 is 500. They have 500 units of pain, you could say, or intensity of pain. Now, remember, this side of the equation has been addressed, and unfortunately, there's not much more we can do here. There are a few things in terms of strengthening the areas around and those kind of things, but there's not a lot that we can do to change the structure of the spine. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but when it comes to, say, chiropractic care or those sorts of things, this side of the equation is not what it addresses. It is actually this side of the equation, the way the nervous system is responding to what's happening in the body. The spine doesn't change at all. So this is the equation, and we can address this side of the equation and bring that down by working within a multidisciplinary team, looking at their psychological health, looking at their exercise routines and structure and their sleep, lots of different things that are mainly around lifestyle interventions to reduce their overall pain by reducing this side of the equation. So let me give you one more example of this. Someone where the body damage side of the equation is the major driver for their symptoms. Someone with, say, severe hip osteoarthritis, with joint space narrowing and inability to bend the hip because it's painful, very structural problem. They go and get a total hip replacement, the whole joint is replaced. So the damage side of the equation goes down. They might have zero damage because the joint's replaced. And it doesn't really matter what's happening on the other side of the equation because the hip was the driver of pain and they get zero pain. If you're a clinician, I would love you to pick apart this equation. Tell me in the comments what would be a better equation, or tell me whether you'd prefer a times or a plus sign there. What are the faults in this? Clinicians love picking apart faults. And if you're someone that suffers with pain, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I'd love to hear if that helped you to make sense of your pain situation, whether it confused you more, or if there's anything you'd like me to answer, please pop it in the comments. Need to emphasize this is not medical advice because I don't know your situation, but feel free to pop some questions in the comments that I can answer in a sort of a general nature rather than being specific to your situation. Stay tuned. I'm going to have some videos of how this plays out in real life scenarios with some famous people.